1982, Cannes Film Festival. Wim Wenders rents a room at the Hotel Martinez, places in it a camera, a tape recorder, and some questions. The principal one being, is cinema a language about to be lost? An art about to die? He invites his colleagues, some you may recognise, to sit alone in the room and deliver their verdicts. Some feared that the rise in television would bring about surges of short attention spans and the loss of real characters on screen. Some feared that the Hollywood system, in its quest for the perfect, universally loved films, would bring about a similar fate. Some weren't worried at all, but nevertheless, that time has passed now, and we find ourselves here at what seems like a similar juncture. In the midst of pandemic panic and radical changes in how we communicate with each other and on screen, we ask a new set of questions. Question 1. What is cinema? Question 2. Is cinema as a language dying? Question 3. What is the future for cinema? Here are the answers.
Here we go. So, Nicholas asked me to talk about whether or not cinema is dead, and I think it's it's a very leading question because you bring all your own assumptions into it, and like you have to define cinema to answer that question. And I think if you're defining cinema as movies in a theater, I think of course there is an inclination to say that's old world, and I don't think that answers the question thoroughly enough. I don't think you could just say like, yeah, less people are going to the movies, so cinema is dead. And if you more broadly say cinema refers to the entire art form, I don't think I could agree with the statement that is dead. I think it's alive and well and doing better than it ever was. And let's see. I think if you look at cinema as an ability to express yourself and communicate something new through the visual language, it is actually more accessible than ever, and it's thriving, and it's just like, why do we need to even ask if it's dead, right? Like, why don't we just move on from this question, because it's not particularly interesting to me. This is way too bright. Is it too bright? I don't know. And look at that, a beautiful moment captured. I think why I'm so opposed to the question, is cinema dead, is because it pushes you into a space where cinema or film or anything is gauged based on its ability to survive, and that is based on business and other things. And I feel like a lot of our lives themselves are taken down a notch by survival need, and I think putting that into our art is gonna make it dead. I think you kill it by asking yourself if it's dead, because then you have to question, what does dead mean? Does it mean it's not making money? Does it mean people aren't watching it? Does it mean the form can no longer... Ooh, a cat. So, let me get this. Because I think what cinema does well is it captures reality, or some manipulated form of reality, and plays it back. I got some snot in my nose. And I think reality is still around, and it's still as valuable as ever to capture it. So I think what's really happening when we talk about if cinema's dead is a fear of our own irrelevance, a fear of our own, not our own death. I think that sounds like a philosopher just rambling. Because I think cinema in its classical forms is dated. I think if you're trying to still make this perfect polished thing that always looks like a movie you would see in a theater, and it's trying to appeal to those same classical norms of structure and aesthetics, I think it's a futile gesture, and it's a hollow gesture that is going to be in pursuit of nothing more than fame or financial success or survivability, as I said. But I think expanding the form to include things that are not that and still calling it cinema is a worthwhile act. Because I think semantics is such a tiring conversation because, of course everyone's going to have their own personal interpretation of words and their meanings. But at the end of the day, it's more of a feeling. And if you feel like, I feel alive while creating, and I feel like that creating is a capturing of something worth capturing. And I feel like, isn't that the start of art and thought around art, that you are creating something? Let me know what you think.
Let's begin. First question here we got is, what is cinema? What a loaded question. My opinion on, I guess, what is cinema has changed, obviously, as you get older and you're introduced to different movies. Because I think initially I had a very narrow view of, I think like a lot of people when you're younger, you see certain kind of movies that you like, and then you kind of lock in on, this is what movies are, this is like what real movies can be, and everything else is garbage, is trash. It kind of is, but it's not a movie. And just seeing a lot of the different changes in technology and the way you can make movies rapidly in the past, couple of years, really. It's kind of forced me to, open up, I think, the idea of what a movie is, what is cinema. And really not open up. It's always been that way. It's just open my perspective up. And my stance would be, short version of what is cinema, as I think, it's the combination of moving images and sound. That's not to say, when I say sound, I mean silent films. Again, that's not excluding them. Silence in itself, it is a choice. And so I feel like sound is often neglected, so that's why I wanted to specify moving images and sound. There's a lot of focus on what's in the frame, and people often neglect, what their ears are doing, and that's a vital aspect. Whether you're choosing to not present any audio at all, that is a choice and affects how you perceive images, versus if you added sound. Look at some of Chaplin's work that he went in and added in, diegetic and diegetic sound, and also music and other elements, and how that changes your perception of the movie. So I think it's a conscious choice, even back then, aware of their limitations and how they could use that to tell the story. So, but I think sound is a vital aspect. A lot of people focus on the frame itself and not necessarily what they're hearing, and that's it's neglected, and it shouldn't be, because it's a vital part. That's why I say moving images and sound is what cinema is. It's not just the moving image. It's an important part, but so is the audio. And so anything can really, any sort of, videos fall into that, I think, category. People try to, distinguish, you have your movies, then you have your YouTube videos, you have your TikToks, your Snapchats, you have your home VHS videos, and then you have your real movies, the cinema. Marvel movies are not cinema. And I don't really agree with that. I think I get the sentiment. You have someone like Martin Scorsese saying, it's not, it's a different kind, and it's maybe not pushing, the language forward, which we'll get to in a second. But it is not a movie. It is not cinema. Because I feel like if you don't, home movies, they're still movies, and if you don't, and Snapchats, TikToks, that's our modern equivalent of what that's home movies for the Gen Z and younger, and for a lot of people that's how they're making their home movies. Their Facebook video feeds and stuff like that, their Instagram stories, that's their home movies. And to a certain extent, I think that is that's the evolution of, you look at something at the very beginning of cinema, like the Lumiere brothers and their just documentary style, where we're just setting up a camera, we're just recording life. And I think that's no different than if it's a giant, 35 millimeter camera, in the middle of the streets of London, or if it's, it's a small iPhone 12 on your counter recording you and your grandmother having one last conversation. Both of those are movies and cinema, and I think for me at least, both those things coexist, and can coexist in the same cinematic world and language, and they're both expressing in their own ways. Both the changes in aspect ratio of people shooting now their home movies vertical, just so the way they hold their device. I think it reflects the times and what they're capturing. But those are different kinds of cinema than something like Fast and Furious or something from Hitchcock. Both, they all have they have different goals, and that's why something I've tried to push more, at least when I look at a movie, when I judge movies, and I hope more people that are interested in film criticism, you judge and you analyze a movie based on what it's trying to express and what are the aims of that movie. And it gets harder, as the time separates the viewer from when the film was made, but not really. I think if it's a good movie, it's usually, it can be pretty clear unless that's the intention. But then again, it's just critical thinking, and that's something else I'll talk about with these other questions. But I think a problem in why a lot of people have trouble with this question of what is cinema is because there is a failure on our part as filmmakers, and just generationally film lovers in general, of pushing harder for film literacy, cinema literacy. And that's something that I think just as a society we need to work towards more, and that's why people have trouble with what is cinema, because we're all kind of introduced to movies in a pretty similar fashion of the larger, bigger, the stuff that has the most money and is widely produced, which is not necessarily the types of movie that are pushing the boundaries of the language or expressing things in the most unique ways. And so that's the first thing you're introduced. You develop a very specific idea of what a movie can and should be, because those movies are produced with a very specific intent and idea of expression, and it's usually pretty limited. And so we're all introduced to that, and so we start off with, this is what a movie should be. And then when you're introduced to other stuff like, silent films, from Fritz Lang here, or I got, something like Albogance's Napoleon, and it's it can be a bit confusing or shocking, because that's why'd they make it like this? This is not what I'm used to. Or if you're used to watching TikTok videos and faster momentum, shorter storytelling time spans, and it's and then so when you have movies, something like Tarkovsky's work, where you're forced to sit in a specific environment, it feels very different, and you're not used to it, so it's a natural. And so when you don't have that literacy of questioning it, you think, oh, this isn't a real movie. This is lazy. We're just sitting here. Oh, this is your mind jumps to a lot of different things because you're trying to understand why you don't like it, but you don't necessarily have the literacy to properly break down why there's a disconnect. So to me, like I said, cinema is very simple. It is moving images and sound working together to make a uniform piece of expression. And I think if you make something that is doing that, then you've contributed to cinema. Maybe in a small way, maybe in a negative way, but that's what cinema is, and you participated in it by making moving images and sound together. Anyway, that's my long-winded response to the first question, which we got through. Yay! Next up, we have, is cinema as a language dead? No. It is a cinema, as an expression, as a mode of expression, is pretty baked into at least our modern society. The only way I see cinema on the whole dying is with the society itself. So, now, that being said, it could, it's not saying it can't die, there's a lot of stuff, especially, now that, no, cinema as a language could die tomorrow, but it's only dying with the filmmakers themselves. And as long as there's a filmmaker, there's cinema. Even the worst ones, they subconsciously will inspire some other people to do better stuff. So as long as there's people, there's cinema, and I really, and maybe that's too optimistic, but I really do believe that it is inherent to our society and our culture on a global scale, and it's not going anywhere as long as we're around. Now, I do think it is definitely somewhat stagnating, maybe on a mainstream level. Like I said, because of the literacy stuff that I've talked about, there is definitely an underappreciation and a misunderstanding of what cinema can do. It is still in its infancy in terms of its perception. It's purely a mode of entertainment and a very specific idea of what entertainment means. Of like, no, I'm here to have fun, not think, and not be challenged and not be presented necessarily with any new ideas. It's very rarely that you'll, more than very rarely, I will, go ahead and make the statement that there's no mainstream, movies in the, that are part of the zeitgeist that are presenting any new ideas to the society and culture that they are made for. And that's a big problem with cinema right now, in my opinion, is that you look at a lot of the movies that are coming out, and there's no movies in that are getting wide releases that are saying anything that on a global or the national scale of their environment, that are presenting ideas that aren't already being discussed in other formats ahead of time and kind of reached a normalization of understanding. That's why, like, movies that are called progressive, like Rise of Skywalker, it's, oh no, look, we're having a gay character off in the background that we can edit out. That's not progressive or a new idea or push anything. That's something, that's being presented in a culture that has already had, legalized gay marriage for a good amount of time. So it's not like a shocking idea of, whoa, and then everyone in society was challenged and confronted with their own prejudices. No, that's what's, I mean, it's good that that's something that is considered just an element of a popcorn flick, but we as a culture are still assuming that's all that movies are for, and that's a whole other thing that I think, at least for the filmmaker, should get away from, is getting caught up with the idea of that's the point of movies. You make movies to make money, when really that's an added bonus. If your movie makes money, wow, great, fantastic, but that really doesn't matter. Your movie has a lot of more important prerequisites that it needs to get through before filmmakers should even be worrying about making money. I think filmmaking, is a privilege, and is an honor, and is, again, it's a mode of expression. And so that's your goal. Is what am I saying to these people as a filmmaker? What are we as these filmmakers making this movie expressing and telling, other people, are either to our own people now or to the future of, hey, this is what we are like, or this is what I thought at this time. What do you think, 100 years from now? Or, commenting on the past. There's a lot of different things you can say, but you are saying something, or at least you can. And so right now, it's not really about that. It's not about what you can say. It's about, not saying anything really. It's just, I do agree with Scorsese's sentiment of the focus on the theme park ride, of it's purely spectacle with nothing behind it. I have nothing against spectacle when it's backed up. Scorsese himself has made movies that have spectacle in them. But what is really special about, at least when he does more spectacle-oriented movies, even something like Cape Fear, is there's subtext and there's commentary and there's elements that make you think and ponder and warrant discussion. And it again is an expression that you can respond to. And so I think, is cinema as a language dead? No. Can it die? For sure. And there's a lot of work outside of filmmaking that we need to do to make sure it doesn't die. Particularly literacy, because if we don't push back against this idea, this narrow-minded view of what cinema can be and what it can do, or what its role in our society is, then it won't necessarily die. There's still going to be people on the fringe. There's always going to be outsider artists. That's just inherent to how societies work. But in terms of as a larger view, as a culture progressing and pushing the medium forward faster, and in my opinion, developing new techniques, more rapidly, and really, I think, expanding, that may not happen, and we're already stagnating, and we could reach, a complete standstill where all the outside work is where the progressive, new work is being done, but as a whole, no one's being introduced to it because we're getting very locked in with, our technology and our perception of what cinema should be. We can be as progressive as possible on our level, but the truth is no one's watching, and that's fine. That's fine too. No one's watching right now, I should say. So for the people that are going to get really bummed and think I'm being cynical, no one's watching right now, and that's okay, because down the line, I think with time, the audience will find the movie. You shouldn't always be focused as a filmmaker on the money and the fame and the attention. No one can watch your movies in your lifetime, and that's okay. As long as you said what you wanted to say in the way you wanted to say it, you should be happy with your movies, and you shouldn't be concerned with or pushing so hard for the business side of them. That's something separate, and that is something that is not really important, in my opinion, to the process of making movies. Because, as a lot of people have probably already said in this, this series of videos, Now it's easier than ever to make a movie. Anyone can make a movie. It hasn't always been the case, but it's amazing. The progression we've had on the technology side, and even in the business side, has improved from its conception. But the innovations has always been at the core of what cinema is. You look at someone like Méliès and building his own camera, and just the invention of so many great techniques. We've progressed so much, and we will continue to progress, whether it's on the outside or on the mainstream. I think on the criticism side, if we can push for literacy, and as cinephiles, really get on that wagon beyond, I think, what the Film Foundation is doing, which at its heart is great, but I think needs to be pushed a lot further. I'm kind of jumping into the final segment, but again, Cinema Dead, no. And it's as long as we're here. I'm repeating myself. I need to figure out. But the point of this message, this little add-on, is just don't sweat the business side of things, the monetary side of things. You can have a day job and make your movies too, and that's fine. That doesn't make you any less of an artist. It doesn't lessen your expression. I think it will only add to it and improve it. And so I think filmmakers, as long as filmmakers are doing that, cinema will be alive and well, and can only improve, as it's been improving since the beginning of its conception. The final question we got: what is the future for cinema? What is the future for cinema? All these questions have kind of blended together, so I've probably already kind of answered this. But again, I think the future is an improvement in literacy. Hopefully, the optimistic answer will be this, and then I'll also probably do a cynical answer, because I think there's several options, but this is the optimistic one, which is there's going to be a massive improvement in the next coming decades. It's going to take a while, and it's going to take a lot of work, but I think if we really start now on the independent level, on top of the some of the more mainstream people, if we push for literacy and in our public education, in a lot of the main industry countries, because I think that'll just lead to the smaller ones following as well. But if we push for literacy and a general public a greater understanding of what cinema can be and what it can do and all the different modes of expression it offers, and the different kinds of movies there can be. We introduce people to critical thinking while they're watching these movies, so it's not writing things off into little boxes of it's either a movie or not a movie. There'll be a big push for that, and then I think also in a more general sense, just greater innovation with technology. I mean, already with the advances that we got, where anyone can affordably get a camera and edit. A lot of computers come in with basic video editing software, and everyone's cellular device has a camera. Everyone has the camera, the editing system. They have their actors. They have their writers. It's all there, built in a very affordable process. So I think we're going to see a big boom of people making more stuff and innovating. Already that we're seeing with stuff changing the format and introducing, expanding found footage to the screen film format, and the way that's been played with in recent years is definitely fascinating. And I think with what there's going to be even more formats that are going to develop based on the different sort of, not necessarily social medias, but the new technology that is just generated for society, and the way filmmakers will repurpose that for telling the stories they want to tell in a new, unique way. That's been true since the beginning of time with movies and storytelling in general, and that's going to stay true after. So I think there's going to be a lot of really fascinating technological innovations that'll continue even more rapidly, and I can't wait to jump on those gimmicks. And but it'll be really fascinating. I think we'll see a big boom, and with the improvement of literacy, I think there'll be just a general greater appreciation for cinema, like we see with literature and some older art forms. Now, that being said, I'm gonna put my cynical hat on, and I do think there is a really good possibility that we don't see an improvement in literacy. Now, I briefly mentioned earlier, Scorsese and some of his thoughts. He's a great filmmaker, and I have a great appreciation and admiration and respect for him as an artist and a filmmaker. His work with the Film Foundation and preservation and education with film literacy is something to be commended. But in my opinion, just amongst filmmakers now, that alone, not even looking at a greater societal, perspective, there is not a big push or grasping of cinema literacy and idea of preservation. Right now, preservation itself is something where I think technology can. I hope to see improvements, because right now that's something that is still very expensive and limited, because film itself is very expensive, and right now that is the longest lasting format within our medium, and that's something none of the independent people can really remotely afford for all the projects they're doing. Like, just look at any of the people just in this subgroup of free online filmmakers, and the number of films they have, and the budgets we're working with, which is usually for the most part under a couple thousand, or even $0 or 30. The amount of money and time it would take to raise the money to make film negatives of even just one of the movies in our filmography is just it's just too much. It's insane. It's 10, 20, 30 times the budget of the movies themselves. And then that's not even taking into account that how many of these people have the facilities or capability to properly maintain and protect the film negative of their films, even just one of them, not all of them, which they should. And our only options for preservation is, especially now with the push with technology, because we have this great new format of digital, and everyone jumped to it, and there's so many great benefits, which I agree. I love digital. I shoot digital, but no one is really taking the time to put in the work of developing multiple proper and affordable systems for preserving digital films for a long-lasting time. Right now, we just have various hard drives that we're going to have to constantly keep updating with the new changes in types of drives and systems for putting that, as computers change at very rapid pace. And so there's seemingly no effort to try to keep up with that. The Film Foundation, has some simple, minor recommendations, which is what I just said, of constantly buying new hard drives and changing and making sure you can export at a high resolution. Thing is, even though there are certain affordable cameras where you can shoot in 4K and higher, not a lot of people can quite afford that. It's going to be HD. If they're lucky, and probably more standard definition, that's something people don't think about when they're making their movies, is even though they're shooting digital, oh great, this is easy, but what definition am I shooting at, and how will that influence the movie, and then also how will that help with preservation down the run, because standard definition stuff can look okay, even projected on the big theater. I have some stuff that's shot on standard definition that even when blown up looks good, but that's part of the aesthetic for the film. Not everyone thinks about that. Again, tying into the literacy, there should be a push for understanding the formats we have available to us, and so there's a real lack of that right now, even amongst these people who are passionate will have gearheads, but it's it's just buy the most expensive thing and show that off. It's not a focus on what are the capabilities and how can I maximize the capabilities of the tools I have. And again, preservation and holding on to these films. There's so many people that think, oh, just putting it on the internet and having a copy on my hard drive is good enough. And then, down the line, a couple of years from now, YouTube's like, it's actually too expensive to just kind of house all of these videos. You know what? Let's clean out the library. Let's refocus and turn YouTube into just a specific YouTube's only content and YouTube original only content. And they, slowly clean house. And a lot of that is just lost because you thought, oh no, YouTube's going to be forever. It's so big. It's a silly saying, but the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So, no, YouTube will not be around forever. Nothing will be. But we can do our best and try our hardest to make sure the stuff that we make is around as long as possible. So I'm pushing for physical media, even though that's not even that long. That's like physical media, the copy is really only going to last the lifetime of the filmmaker for the most part. It's about anywhere between 50 to 100 years. So that's with Blu-ray, and I'm pretty sure with 4K stuff too. And so that's not, and that's a generous estimation. There's so many different production issues, and depending on if you're using dual layer, single layer, that really fucked that up. But that's the most affordable option. And even then, that's it's a little bit more expensive, but that's really affordable, and that's great. Because it's like $100 for most authoring works for DVDs and Blu-rays, and then the cost of the discs themselves, like producing most of my Blu-ray stuff. The cost on my end, doing my own labor and printing and designing, each copy is really only costing you, with the case and everything, about $3. So that's really great, and I think that's good. But again, that's the most affordable and best thing independent people have right now for their work. And that's 50 to 100 years, and that's if you can somehow get copies in other people's hands. Then I think that's an okay way to preserve it temporarily. But you compare that to the jump up to film, which is about 1,000 years. It's a drastic difference in preservation. And so I think either working on the affordability of film, which I don't think is going to be the case, because even in its heyday, it was expensive. I really think unless there is a new format developed, which I'm hopeful, but people can settle into their own ways. But without a developing of a new affordable format that bridges the gap between digital and analog, and its main purpose is for preservation as long as possible, and it is affordable, anyone can get it and wing it in the hands of the people. Without that, we're going to lose a lot of great films. And so, you look at the Film Foundation and its push for preservation, but even then, it's expensive, and their focus is still playing catch up with the movies that we neglected, as a society, and the studios neglected, because it's just about the business and the money, and these had a dollar value, and it was tied to their silver. So when the artistic value was not there, then the films disappeared. So we're still playing catch up with those movies. That a lot of movies being made now by independent people or fringe outside artists are getting lost as they're being made, because the work in education and technology is not there and affordable to them yet, to where we can take care of our movies in the long run. We have some tools and we're going to use them, but within the next 50 to 100 years, that can be lost unless we push to get, again, a new format for film. And I'm really hopeful for that. I'm not smart enough with chemistry, I think, to really, develop my own, but that is a life goal for me, to make sure we at least put in the initial groundwork for a new format. The other thing, like I said, is literacy. the cynical point of view for me is that there is not going to be a greater push and acceptance that film literacy in a public education manner. And without that, like I said, only the outsider artists are going to be the ones innovating, but they're also not going to be being preserved. And so the innovation itself is going to just be lost through the years, and we will see the language stagnate to where there's just this one idea and we're churning out the same stuff. It's not dead because it's still being made, and there'll be kernels and accidents, happy accidents happening, that new ideas will slip in, but they will never latch on and take hold the way some of the greatest innovations have. I did also want to make the point that, I know a lot of people in this independent subgroup here of making movies and putting them out for free on the internet are kind of the mindset that just by putting, it's a quantity thing, just by putting more movies out there for free and having just a larger number of movies out there, that'll kind of change perceptions and people's, appreciation. Just like, look, you can have all these movies for free. And I really disagree with the quantity thing, both in terms of for the filmmaker side of things and innovating. And, while, you'll get a lot more practice making more as you make more movies, you're not necessarily, improving. You can practice all you want, but if you don't focus on form, then a lot of that practice isn't, useful to you. Similar to like learning instruments or working out or any other thing. Like, you can lift a bunch of weights, but if you're not doing good form, then you're actually hurting yourself more than you're doing good for your body. Or if you're trying to learn piano, but you're practicing bad finger form. It's the same with movies. You could make 100 movies in a year. That's a lot of movies. But if you go about it a very specific way and you don't change or try to improve, then that's just bad form while you're making that, and so you're not really learning anything through those 100 movies. So I don't really like the quantity mindset that the people have, but also that's on the filmmaker side. For the more for the more perception side of things, of saying, oh, this is going to be a big boom in independent films and change the way people look at it. For that, I would like to point to the video nasty era, and with the boom in technology of the analog, the semi-analog to digital format of tape, and how that was this great, cheap, affordable, technology filmmakers now had to shoot their movies that we saw used in the mainstream and on the independent level to make movies a lot more affordable, a lot cheaper, a lot faster, and a huge boom we saw of straight to VHS movies and stuff like that. And how many people really have a higher regard, or how did that really change people's perceptions of movies overall? We saw some great, but on the most part, how many of the movies have we just lost because people cranked them out and then just left them on tape, and then a lot of that rotted as lost? But even the ones that are being preserved by some boutique labels, like just the public's perception of those movies and that period in general is not a very fond or positive one. There's some vague 80s nostalgia, but I think that's tied to a larger decade positive outlook, not that specific type of movie. It's still very niche and very limited, and I don't think has added too much by itself. And so that's something I'd point to, and I would caution independent filmmakers to think out when they want to just run and jump and just, make a movie for its own sake. Because we already had that boom happen once of people making movies just for its own sake. And in my opinion, it hasn't done too much. Again, speaking on the Film Foundation, they have some efforts towards literacy and education, but they seem to have the idea that, the responsibility is on the educators to come and accept this idea of teachers and the government people who run, education on the local, state, and national level in places are just like, oh yes, no, of course it's important. Thank you for these. Thank you for the curriculum, and we will definitely use it. No, but non-cinephiles do not have appreciation for cinema in the same way. That's why they're not cinephiles. And so just assuming that they will accept literacy as important, something to incorporate, is it's not the right way to go about it, and it's very limited. Also, the curriculum they have for cinema literacy is, in my opinion, very weak. It is not, the materials they offer educators doesn't necessarily provide the educators with all the tools to both get themselves excited about teaching literacy, as well as teaching a general sense of literacy to kids. It's purely focused around case-by-case basis with specific films and very limited areas. I think they need both a more diverse presentation of the movies they examine for specific elements of the curriculum, but they also need a broader, just here are the core tools that can be applied to any movie that the educators would like to present their students with. Now, you have to show your kids Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and you have to show your kids, X, Y, or Z. Here are the tools. You can apply it to Kung Fu Panda. You can apply it to Jumper. You can apply it to Keen. You can apply it to, Monkey Bone, or you could apply it to Solaris. And it's cinema literacy is just these tools about examining the genre, and you can apply it to any of these. And the way it's phrased and the way it's worded, currently, I think their work is, it puts a lot of the work on the educators themselves, and I think there should be more money and infrastructure developed to make it easy on the educators, because that's a whole other issue that, at least in this country, in America, that is neglected. So I think without it's a lot of work, but we as filmmakers, that's who the responsibility really is on first and foremost. It's the filmmakers themselves, providing as much of the groundwork, both in the technological side, the education side, and the medium itself, of providing it to where it's easiest for outsiders to understand why this is important and why it's great. Because over time, with that education, then it'll become inherent to the society, but only until we achieve those things, both with the format and preservation, with the education and literacy, and making it easy to communicate and educate people on these ideas of cinema literacy, and then easy to make the movies themselves. We got one of those, we still got to achieve those other two, and it may not happen in the current state unless we try really hard. And I can criticize Scorsese, the Film Foundation, and all these people for really lacking in those departments, but it doesn't matter if I, myself, and us other independent people don't do the work too. So that's a goal I'm going to work on, and while we have the distribution and the movies I make, and I really hope anyone who's watching this works on it too, because it's important. And I think just by trying, we will contribute and do our best to preserve cinema and the language. And yeah, so we'll see. I am at heart very optimistic about the future. I see a lot of bright kernels and potential on other people, but only if they're willing to step up and do the work. I'm trying. It's very slow moving. I understand. It's been several years progress, just getting to this point of making some of my own Blu-ray stuff and learning how certain elements of movie making itself and the format. There's so much back catalog of education I still need to do in terms of our older format and the specific elements of how we can improve on it. So we'll see. But again, I hope this is helpful. I hope I answered those questions. I hope I offered some insight and maybe something a little bit different than what other people are saying. I know a lot of people are probably I'm going to seem like a very dark cloud compared to a lot of the other people that are responding. That's not really my intention. These are just my concerns and my thoughts that I don't see being discussed, and I hope they are discussed more in the future. But if not, they will at least be by me. My voice will be going as long as I have it, and then when I don't, then it's not my problem anymore. So But yeah. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for including me in this documentary if you do. And at the very least, thank you for prompting this discussion and inspiring me to make this. So thank you, Don't Tell Show. Thank you, the viewer, and have a great day.
First question is, what is cinema? And I was thinking about this, that when Andre Bazin and other early film theorists were grappling with this question back in the 30s and 40s, I think they were looking at it primarily in terms of what makes cinema unique from the other arts. When we think about it today, I think we have to think beyond this now to what makes cinema unique from other moving images. Now with television, web-based video games, and virtual reality, is cinema a different medium? Is it a different experience than these other forms of moving images? And I would say that for me, cinema encompasses potentially all moving images. I think how those images, or what those images look like, is going to be very different from how we've traditionally thought of it. I don't think cinema anymore means having to make a commercial, 2-hour narrative feature film that's watched in a theater with an audience on the big screen. I think now there are all these different possibilities that have been opened up for the moving image, and that all of these, for me, kind of fit under this larger umbrella of cinema. To me, the moving image remains really the foundation, though, on which all of it is built. And if you go all the way back to the earliest films of the Lumiere brothers, like the train arriving at the station, all the way up to the short form content that we see today on platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, I think that the moving image really remains the core of what is cinema. I do think there's a lot of questions within that about how those images are manipulated, and I still do think that those are central to it as well. The questions of time, editing, the fact that every image and arrangement of those images represents a choice on the part of directors, cinematographers, editors. I do think all that remains central to thinking about what cinema is, but rather than trying to limit or narrow that definition, I think it's fruitful to expand it. I think it can, by expanding how we think about cinema and looking at its connection with all these other forms of moving images that have emerged in more recent decades, I think it can only really expand how we think about cinema generally, and allow us to see a lot of potential there, a lot of possibilities that otherwise we might miss if we're sticking with some of the more traditional ways of thinking about it. I do think one of the other big differences is moving away from as film becomes more and more affordable, and moving away from a lot of the commercial considerations that I think in the past that those expectations sort of were imposed upon cinema and almost helped to define cinema. I think that as a lot of those, as cinema and filmmaking is freed from a lot of those commercial considerations and restrictions, I think that it'll open up a lot of different ways of thinking about what it is. The second question is cinema as a language dead? I would say that in terms of cinema as a common language, yes. I think what's happening is that the way that cinema maybe functioned as a kind of common language over the last century is dying, I think we could say, but I would add that I don't really think of it so much as dying as it is evolving. What's probably true is that there is no longer that one way of making a film that, such as the classical style that dominated the commercial cinema for much of the last century. I think now what we are seeing is a lot of different approaches that are gaining traction, gaining much more widespread acceptability. Again, talking about short form content on the web, for example, that's just one example of how there's a lot more alternatives now. I think that have gained a lot of traction and are all perfectly valid as. But I think what will happen is that as more of these different approaches appear, that over time they'll become they'll sort of form their own codified grammar and languages of in the same way that, again, like the classical style of cinema filmmaking did for much of the last century. I think that'll take time. I think that each of these new formats brings with it maybe initially a set of new expectations, and then over time those evolve and could be said to constitute a kind of a language of their own. I do think that what we'll see is, rather than one kind of dominant or common language of cinema, as we've seen for much of the past century, we will see multiple languages emerge, each that, like I said, bring with them their own sets of expectations, their own conventions, and that function in really unique ways. But yeah, I think just as cinema itself has really moved beyond a lot of the traditional boundaries and restrictions that have defined it for the last 100 years, I think with that will come inevitably an evolution of the language of cinema, and will reflect that variety of approaches. Third question is, what is the future for cinema? Without wanting to get into a lot of predictions, I'll say that one thing that I see for the future of cinema is that it will become increasingly fragmented and segmented. And as there are arguably as many different as film moves, I'll say this first, that as film moves increasingly towards becoming a truly democratized art form, thanks to the developments in the technology, not just in terms of being able to make your film, but now to deliver it to audiences and to viewers. I think we will see increasing fragmentation of both in terms of the types of films being made, but also what viewers are looking for. And I think what we're seeing now is the technology and the delivery systems are evolving to a point where that's becoming increasingly possible, and it's unlocking a lot of really exciting possibilities. I do think that the more traditional models of viewing cinema, of sitting in the dark with an audience, watching it on a big screen in a movie theater, it's hard to say. I don't know what the future holds for the more traditional models at this time. I think that it will remain a part of the experience, certainly, for the foreseeable future. But I do think that the ways in which the content and the work is delivered and consumed or viewed, or however you want to put it, I do think that will continue to become. I think that there'll just be more and more ways in which to do that. The obvious things are, of course, we television, nothing new, but watching video on smartphones. Just simply at that level of the technology of how we can watch things has opened up a lot of possibilities. But I think the fragmentation that I'm thinking of has a lot to do with all the different voices now, all the different perspectives and approaches that will be possible thanks to the democratization of the technology. This goes back to the idea of the Alexander Ostruch's idea of the camera stylo in 1948. And of course, what Francis Ford Coppola talked about in his in the documentary Hearts of Darkness, when he talks about the idea of kid in Ohio or whatever who uses her parents' camcorder to make a brilliant piece of personal filmmaking. I think it's that emphasis on the personal that I really am getting at here, and that I see as being what's really exciting to me for the future of cinema. Again, I think freeing it from a lot of the commercial limitations and restrictions, and thinking beyond that, and thinking about film and cinema generally as a form of personal communication, of personal expression. I think that's where the greatest potential lies right now. As I say, I do think it will become increasingly fragmented as a result of that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it simply reflects a greater variety and a greater variety of possibilities to get ideas across, and what those ideas will look like when they're put into action, when they're visualized. So I would say that for me the future of cinema looks very bright. It looks very exciting. I do think that we're only beginning to see a lot of what the possibilities might look like as they continue to develop. But I do think it's that increasingly moving towards the true democratization of film, which has been going on for a while now, but is becoming more and more of a reality. I think those ideas that have gone back, at least to the 40s and beyond, are closer than ever to being fully realized. And once that happens, that what cinema may look like on the as we kind of arrive at that point may look very different. But I do think that it will be, overall it'll be richer for all the different innovations that are coming. Anyway, those are my thoughts on these three questions. I hope this is of some use for your documentary. For the Don't Tell show, feel free to use this in your documentary. And I hope these were of some use in thinking about these questions.
Because, listen, hello, my name is Joshua Morrison, and I am blind and deaf, and I can't smell or touch. Okay, now let's make those sort of downwardy. There we go, that looks good. Right, now time to make that fucking massive. Okay, less fucking massive, let's say like... Let's say like that. There we go, I got my 3 questions up on the board. I'm recording from every single orifice. Fucking hell, man, my set's falling apart. There we go. Are we allowed to swear on here? Hello, this is the Don't Tell show. Wait, no, it's not. It's the Do Tell show, because we are telling all and what's going on in the world of filmmaking and cinema. All sorts of crazy sort of shit's going on down here, alright? And you need to pay attention, because if you're in this business, you need to know what's going on. Otherwise, you're gonna be in for a world of hurt, okay? Listen, this is a painting by Rothko. Now, what do you notice about it? Do you notice anything about it? It's shit, okay? It's shit. It's very, very bad, this picture, okay? Do you want to know why? Because it's boring. Now, let's throw out words like good, bad, brilliant, beautiful, ugly. They don't matter. Because here's the question that I have to you. Well, it's actually the question that the Mr. Don't Tell show... the Mr. Don't Tell Show guy has for you. Here's the question. What is cinema? Right. So what I think cinema is this. It's a video. It's an MP4 file or an MOV file that is put into a long continuous segment to tell a story. I've talked about some of this stuff in my video, What is Art? So here I am plugging myself. Now advertisement might be seen as bad. Now I hate good and bad. I hate the concepts of them. Because here's the thing, some of my favourite films that I get the most enjoyment from aren't the Citizen Kanes, they aren't the Casablancas, they aren't the 2001 A Space Odysseys. I actually think that those films aren't very good, in my opinion. They do everything well, you know, they do every single thing brilliantly, but they don't get a visual reaction from me. Alternate History Hub gives me a more visual reaction than Citizen Kane. Does that mean Alternate History Hub is a better media entity than Citizen Kane, than the works of Orson Welles? That is what I have been wondering for a very, very long time. Okay? Now, I'm not too sure what the answer to this question is. I mean, most people will tell me that it's, you're stupid. However, I would like to go in a completely different direction, because I think that cinema is whatever you want it to be. If you want to do a 55-minute PowerPoint using Microsoft Paint that tells a story, or even doesn't tell a story, that's your prerogative. There's the fucking film Kynananananas, the fucking, I got it on Pirate Bay ages ago, and it was, oh my god, it was a good film, but it's definitely one of them ones that's experimental. But the whole point of it is, it's sort of telling a story about the overall idea of humanity and almost the purpose of life, the meaning of our very existence. That's kind of where it's getting at, but sort of isn't as well. And I think it's more leaning towards it's not doing that, and I kind of misinterpreted it, because I'm going to be honest with you. Are you ready for this? I wasn't paying that much attention. I left the room 3 times to go do things and then went back. That is what people do now. They leave the room while your thing is playing. It is a distraction from the morbid misery of reality. Okay? Everyone's got their voices. Mine is selling my soul to the fucking companies out there. You get me? So, what is good and bad is what I want to get at. Good is bollocks, and bad is bollocks. But, I tell you what, bad movies, you do seem to get more of an enjoyment. There's more of a communal element to watching a bad movie, because you're more free to comment on things. You're more free to go... You're more free to do that. In a good film, you're less free to do that. It's more of a solo emotional experience that you're going through. One that you take on your own. There's not so much of a conversation being had throughout the film as you're doing it. You know, as you're watching the piece. You sit down, you shut up, and you watch it. You might go, wow, that was good, you know? Or, damn, this is so much better than the movie we watched last night. But you won't get that same communal feeling that you would get if you're watching The Room, you know? Which is probably, it's the one that everyone knows is the best bad movie ever, but seriously, does that not make it one of the best movies ever? And I'm not saying this ironically. If you get more enjoyment from The Room than you do from Citizen Kane, and I'm using Citizen Kane a lot because it is the de facto, this is the best movie ever. And I saw it, I was, you know, putting my mouse cursor on the screen to get the little timeline thing up so many times because it's so boring. I like them shots where it goes through the sign. You know, them shots, they're good. I like those shots. And I also liked the bit where he's given the speech. He's given the speech later into the film. That was cool. And that's about it where I like it. Casablanca I like a little bit more.
but it's, I don't know. I feel like if it had been made in the 80s, I'd have liked it more, or the 90s if it was, because it's got a bit of a Richard Linklater-y feel to it, but there's certainly more story, more traditional narrative. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with a traditional narrative. If it's done well, it can be done extremely well. But if it's done badly, it's so boring. And I think instead of good and bad, there's boring and not boring, okay? So that's what cinema is to me. Is what I'm watching boring? Am I watching it to say, I've watched this, I'm so cool, look at me. I watched Citizen Kane. I watched every single Stanley Kubrick movie, and I was only bored during half of them. Look, I'm not some kind of cine expert. I don't go out and watch films all the time, you know? I haven't seen all the French New Waves, I haven't seen the German Expressionists. I've got the films I like, I've got the films I don't like, and I've got the films that I've been meaning to watch for ages. Just as everybody else does. I'm not a huge cinema buff, which is kind of weird because I do make the movies. So, I guess this kind of goes into the next point of, is cinema as a language dead? And I would say to that, yes, it is. In the traditional sense of, here's the plot, here's what's going on, here's happening next. Because it's being questioned more and more and more, especially through the internet that we got now. You know, memes, for instance, they're going all around the world, all around the circles. And people spend so much more time looking at memes than watching a film. How often have you heard someone say, oh, I just don't have time to watch a movie? But then they'll go and just spend all their life just like, duh. Oh, I've got a phone to do this. Duh. 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 This is a really good stereotype of every single person that uses the phones. Duh. Duh. Right. So, seriously though, I think that there's something good to be learned from the memes and from the internet culture in general in terms of keeping people's fucking attention. Oh my god. Do you want to know what I've spent the last week doing? I should have been making videos. I haven't. I've been watching fucking Reddit. I've been scrolling through fucking Reddit comments. Just going, yeah, that guy makes a fairly good point. I don't actually care any regard. I don't have any single bit of interest in what they're saying. No. Let's get up what they got. Let's see what they got for me. The definition standard of libel is pretty much the same as the US. The issue is that there's a rule against anything said by a member of parliament during parliamentary proceedings being used as evidence in defamation suits. This was meant to be so that members of parliament could have freedom of speech, required to do things like expose corruption without worrying about being sued for defamation. However, politicians recently realised that the rule creates a loophole, allowing them to admit to things like corruption in Parliament, and if any person points out that they admitted to corruption, that member of Parliament can then sue the person for defamation. Normally, people sued for defamation can use a defence that what was said was actually true. However, now, because of this parliamentary privilege, they can be sued just for saying that this person said a thing in Parliament and that that thing was bad, and that they then cannot use the truth defence because that means that the truth was not true in the Parliament of the parliamentary privilege. And shut up! Jesus Christ! This is ridiculous! How am I paying attention to this? There's so many films in the world that are so much more interesting than this, but I'm not watching them. I'm not watching that one either, which is more boring. I'm not watching the guy that did the fucking Crank movies. I'm so sick of this. I just want to be watching movies, because every time I do watch a movie, it's very, very nice. It's very, very happy and enjoyable. However, it's too long. It's too goddamn long. And I don't have the attention span anymore because of that computer there. And this computer here. I cannot believe what they are doing to us. They are destroying our souls from within. And that is why I say that cinema as a language is dead. Not because of anything that happened within cinema, but it's the same reason that theatres now aren't getting the money that they need to stay open. Because of outside forces. The internet is destroying it all. And the internet does bring some good things, however, it needs to be destroyed. What's the future for cinema? I'll tell you what the fucking future of cinema is. It's them bloody video essays that are on the internet that are like 50 minutes long that talk about something that you're not interested in, but you watch all of it because they got you hooked. You think, ooh, I really wonder what this YouTuber I've never heard of before is up to. Or yeah, the ones that I like are like the Wenders productions where they talk about like the shipping ports in Montreal and shit like that. I don't know why I find this interesting. It's the most boring stuff on the planet, but it's so soothing. You know, I just wish I could make stuff like that instead of these stupid fucking movies. Why am I in this fucking community? Why don't we just join the fucking window for productions guys over there and the real life lobby and the people that make fucking bucks off of those fucking videos, man? What are we doing? Why are we here? I don't know. I don't know, man. We gotta get out of here. We gotta get out of the internet now. Get off the internet. Turn your screen off now. Or so be it. Some serious things will happen to you. Your eyes will turn square and then your tongue will turn rectangular. And that's not even a real shape. You don't even want to know what that shape looks like. Seriously. If you want to get out of here, you gotta get out now. You gotta get out now. Don't even watch the rest of the video. There's like 15 minutes left of this video. You need to click off now and get outside where the digital trees are there to mention your name in the comments section. Get out now. Get out. Get out. Get out now. Now. 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 Get out now, now, get out now, now, get out now, 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 get out now, 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 get out now, 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 get out now. And I didn't even get to do the joke where the picture fell on my head. Ow. Oh, shh. Oh, shh. It's perfectly fine. My second camera fell off the top shelf and it landed in the washing basket and it's fine. Everything works out in the end. Oh, I haven't got the sound on. You're gonna have to dub what I said.
What is cinema? I feel like that is such a massive question that's super complicated, but also on the other side, it's also a really simple question. Cinema for me is just a movie. It's just a film, whether that be a doco, a live action, an animation, a short, a feature, it just means film. Is cinema dying? No. I think cinema is thriving at the moment, not dying. Just because there are so many ways that you can make a film, right? Like you can just grab your phone and make a film if you want to. Look at Tangerine, beautiful film, shot on a phone. There is no excuse. If you do want to make something, you can make something. I think the things that stop people are like fear of failure, fear of it not being good, thinking that you have to have like the right equipment, just fear basically I think stops people, including me. I've made shitloads of short films, haven't made my feature yet because I'm scared. Could blame it on money, lack of money, but really it's because I'm scared. I am making my first feature though. I've shot the first day and I've got 14 to go, so I'm doing it, but I feel like I waited a really long time because I was scared to do it. Not scared to make shorts, love making shorts. Features, I was scared because like I put so much pressure on myself for it to be good, for it to do something for my career, for it to reach people, and that's a lot of pressure. So I've taken that pressure off and I'm in the middle of making my first feature, which is awesome. And so yeah, films are it's just so easy to make a feature film these days, or a film these days. So I think that cinema is not dying. I think that it's thriving. It's in its element, and it's only going to keep going, which is great. The future of cinema, I think, wow. Yeah, I mean, I really do think that the future of cinema, I think with folk filmmaking, how people are just making feature films and then putting it on their YouTube channel, I honestly think that in 10 years' time, it's going to be something that everyone does. It won't be questioned. It won't seem like it's like the second or last option. It'll just be something that people do. For instance, like 10, 20 years ago when people were making micro-budget films, putting it into festivals, and then they wanted it to have like a theater release, right? And putting it on iTunes was like, ugh, was not what they wanted. Like, it was like the last resort, and they're like, oh, I don't want to put my film on iTunes. But now everyone puts their film on iTunes, and I think that it's going to be the same with YouTube channels. People will just put it on, and I know that people are starting to, and I think that's amazing, and I think it's great, but it hasn't caught wildfire yet. And I do think that in 10 years' time, everyone will be putting their feature films online. Look at Netflix. Have you noticed Netflix? Go to Netflix YouTube channel, and they're starting to put some feature films on their YouTube channel. I saw it the other day. I think it was a documentary. It was absolutely beautiful, and I'm pretty sure it was available, I don't know, until September or something. But Netflix is starting to do it. It's definitely something that will be really common and like mainstream, I think, in 10 years' time. So people that are doing it now are like making history, which is awesome. And yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for having me. I really love, obviously cut this bit out, but I really, really love your YouTube channel. I stumbled upon it, I think like maybe 2 weeks ago, from following like Dan and Joel, and I just sort of stumbled upon one of your reviews of one of their films, and I really like your channel, and I think it's awesome. And thanks so much for doing this too. It's so nice to, I don't know, just to have an inclusive thing to be a part of, and to be a part of the documentary is really great. So thanks. Happy editing.
Hi, I'm Hamish Downie, and I'm a filmmaker based in Japan. Yeah. So, what is cinema? Well, as someone whose day job is, as someone whose day job is an English teacher in Japan, I can say cinema is the movies. It is a place where we go to see a movie. But I don't think that's the answer to the question. What is cinema? Cinema is cinematic, So what is cinematic? I think that's something that we can see, but we can't necessarily describe. Why is, 60 frames per second flat, boring television and looks really cheap? And why is 24 frames magic? I think cinematic means it's magic. Like, what is it about, that cut between, in Lawrence of Arabia, where he blows out the match and suddenly it's a sunset, and that's cinema. That's cinematic. Like, that's telling, that's visual storytelling. So that's what I would say cinema is. It is visual storytelling. But of course, you have all the other elements. You have words. So you have, you've got music. It's putting all of those art forms together in one package. But it is basically, fundamentally, a visual medium, as it derives from the silent world. So, question 2, or a paraphrase of question 2, is the language of cinema dying? I think maybe it could be dying. Or are we looking back at the past through rose-coloured lenses? Because, what rises to the top, but, the creme de la creme, and so when we look at what's happened in the past, we think like, oh, this is marvelous, this is cinema. But then when we look at today and we compare the good, bad, and the ugly, and you say like, oh, well, maybe cinema is dying. I don't necessarily think it is. I mean, obviously there's a proliferation of mediums, and I don't think, I'm not, what's his name? Martin Scorsese, or all of those other people. Like, I don't think you have to be cinema. I don't think you have to be shown in a theatre to be cinema. I think you could be cinematic on your smartphone screen. But it just has to be magic. That's what it is. Can you create magic through the art of the visual medium? And I think there are practitioners, I mean, I'm lucky enough, like this guy, I think Paul Leeming is a practitioner in the art of cinema, as a cinematographer and as a director. And I think it just means that, I think people just have to, because it's so easy to, buy a camera that can potentially create these amazing things. But, the tools are there. It's just, it's up to us to be creative. And to me, cinema is creativity. And I don't think creativity will ever be dead, but I do think it needs to be nurtured. So, what is the future of cinema? The future of cinema. Boo, boo, boo. The fun thing about making predictions is that inevitably they will be wrong, or they might be right, or, maybe I should be super duper vague, like whatever his name is, Nostradamus, and and whatever I say could be interpreted, so I don't have to be right. I do feel that whether you call it truly independent cinema or truly independent filmmaking or folk filmmaking, I think that's the future. And and that both opens and closes a door, because when you don't have, obviously a lack of money can foster creativity, but then you might want to have big ideas and then you can't do them. Like, I think one of the reasons why Ed Wood is considered so hokey or so bad is because he was before his time. Like, he wasn't around, the ideas he wanted to create, and because he had very, very serious ideas, but because the technology at the time was so hokey, it just looks like a joke. Now, there could be many other reasons why Ed Wood is who he is, but and I think, like, if we do go down this folk filmmaking path, that we might get back there, where those big grand ideas will just maybe not have a place. I don't necessarily mean like the $200 million films, because they seem to be here to stay, perhaps, but I don't know, like the mid, what they always talk about, but the mid-budget films do seem to be dead. So it's a shame that those stories may not be able to be made in the way that they could have been made before. But, as I said, cinema is creativity, and I don't think creativity is ever dead. And so I just hope that people pick up the mantle, try and do something different, and, because there's only going to be one you, and the kind of cinema that you would make, no one else is going to make it. So I hope cinema, the future of cinema is you.
Okay. Hello. My name is Jonathan Christian, and this is my TED Talk. My name is Jonathan Christian. I'm a writer, director, and composer. This video is just hopefully gonna be a part of a documentary put together by the Don't Tell Show, which is kind of examining the current state of cinema as it is right now in the year 2021. And examining where it's at and where it could potentially go. So yeah, coming out the gate swinging with the big question, what is cinema? Which is a loaded question, to say the least. I would say in terms of the literal definition, how I would define it, it's the use of filmmaking to tell a story. I think defining cinema is incredibly important. But it's also, it can be both progressive and regressive, just due to people's opinions on how filmmaking should be defined. I've seen instances of the filmmaking being, I guess, too conservative in how it's defined, in terms of not wanting to expand to include alternative forms of storytelling using different mediums. In terms of, I guess, screen movies or certain instances of found footage, I think some people might not consider cinematic, which I wouldn't agree with. But then on the other end of the spectrum, I've seen the definitions that are far too open-ended in terms of saying, well, anything's cinema. Rashomon is cinema, and so are cat videos. It's all cinema. They're all movies, and I don't agree with that either. I think there is a definite need for objectivity in how cinema is described. I think the intentions are probably, in my opinion, the most blatant element in terms of how I would define cinema and what's not cinema, and that really is in its intentions to convey a story in some sort of narrative. I'm not saying it has to be linear, A to B, but I think the purpose of the cinematic medium is to convey a story, to communicate a message, something of importance, whether that's personal or relating to the self or relating to things going on in culture worldwide across the globe. But yeah, that's how I would define cinema. Yeah, so question 2. Is cinema as a language dead or dying? Overall, I would say no. Are aspects of it dead or dying? Yes. Relating to the first part, overall, I would say no, because I think when people typically raise this question, it's in reference to, I would say it's specifically directed to certain types of films not being popular or widely accepted by mainstream audiences, generally speaking. I think a case in point is the prevalence, or I would say, for a while, the prevalence of superhero films, but I would say even that those type of films are kind of waning out now. So when superhero films were at their peak, people were like, oh, is this cinema dead because this is all audiences want to see? And I don't agree with that. I think declaring that cinema is dead or dying specifically based on the output of certain genres of films is a little extreme and unwarranted. The bigger question with that, when it specifically relates to superhero films or films of that ilk, the blockbuster, is more so related to the content and the way that films like that use the filmmaking language or lack thereof to communicate their story, which leads into the second part. Are aspects of the cinematic language dead or dying? Yes. I think the desire by filmmakers on the mainstream level to use the cinematic language to push the medium forward, from any angle, whether that's from a visual standpoint, a narrative standpoint, is that dead? Yes. But I would say that it's been dead for a while. I don't think this is a new phenomenon. But again, even saying that, what I say overall is, cinema just at this point of progression where it's done, we're just going to stop right here? No. Because there's always going to be good movies and there's always going to be bad movies. Regardless at what point of history you're looking at, that's always been the case, and that's always going to be the case. Relating back to mainstream audiences and mainstream films, what we're really seeing at this point in history is a lack of cinematic literacy, in terms of people. Well, I would even say on both levels, whether it's on the consumer or the artist level, is the lack of cinema literacy. In terms of being able to communicate or replicate what makes a quantifiably good film, because I do believe that there are a film can be quantifiably labeled as good or effective or bad and ineffective. Entertainment value is primarily subjective, because what some people find entertaining or engaging, other people don't. And I think entertainment value is not necessarily reliant on the objective quality of a film. But no, is cinema as a language dead or dying? No. Overall, no. Are aspects of it dead? Yes. But they've been dead for a while. So if that's your primary concern, I would say don't worry about it, because it's been dead. And we're still getting movies that you, not specifically you, the you as a plural noun, enjoy. Presumably. Or maybe you just hate movies. Maybe you hate all movies. In that case, final question: what is the future of cinema? I don't know. And frankly, I don't care. Kidding. As you can tell by my background, I'm very passionate about film, because there's hearts behind me, and hearts are love. In all seriousness, I'm very passionate about cinema, and I'm very passionate about the future of cinema and where cinema is at currently. So if you were to ask me where I think cinema is going in the future, just cracked my knuckles in case you were wondering what that sound was. I think overall, do I think it's going to be positive? Yes and no. I think we're going to see an increase of disparity between the mainstream and the independent level, which has always existed, but I think is going to expand even more. I think on a mainstream level, in terms of theatrical distribution, we're going to see fewer and fewer films featured in theaters, but the films that are featured are going to have bigger and bigger budgets, which is going to make it even harder for even small to mid-budget mainstream films finding an audience, and finding any sort of popularity, simply because they're going to get outboxed by, I don't know, whatever genre is popular in the next 3 to 5 years that's put out by whatever studio, Disney or whatever studio is at the top at that point. I think also within that same kind of ideology, we're going to see an increase in filmmaking as a business model, and not so much as a form of storytelling or anything that has anything of artistic value, again, on the mainstream level specifically, I think that's been something that's been brewing kind of for a while, but in the midst of, or I guess I should say in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, even though we're still in it, I think in the years to come, in order to make any sort of profit on the films that are being distributed, they're going to be seen less and less as films, as artistic endeavors. They're going to be seen more as business ventures, and means to make money, and keep the Hollywood system alive, not for the sake of pushing the medium forward or even communicating important messages to the audience, but simply to, on a financial, monetary level, stay afloat. I think on the independent level, and I'm not saying independent in terms of like Neon or A24, I mean like truly independent. YouTube filmmakers, Vimeo filmmakers, people who make films and upload them to Amazon Prime, like people that are way outside of the studio system, on the fringe. I think we're gonna see an oversaturation of content, and I think it's gonna become easier to make films. I think more people are going to want to make films and actually make films, but getting them seen is going to become even harder, just due to the sheer influx of films. And I also think we're going to see a drop in quality, honestly, because something I've noticed in the independent level is just a lot of films that are just movies to be movies that aren't really trying to say a whole lot. They're just movies to be movies, and I don't want that to be discouraging, because I really do want to see more people make films. I want to see more good movies, but very, very rarely is a film that is just its sole purpose is just to exist. Very rarely is that, in my opinion, entertaining or engaging, because I think, like I said, the purpose of a film is to tell a story. I think the very nature of a story is rooted in its desire to communicate a message. And so when you set out to make something that isn't trying to say anything, I don't think that's good for the medium, and I think that's doing more harm than good, pushing forth the narrative that everything is subjective, everyone just makes their own truth. It's not beneficial in the slightest, specifically when it comes to art and pushing them. If your goal is to see someone succeed, it's not to coddle them, and that's why I would encourage, if you're an independent artist watching this, please try and push the medium forward any way you can. Have a story to tell, and try to communicate that in the best way that you can, and in a way that you haven't seen done before. That would be my rallying cry, is just try to do something different. Don't follow trends. Don't follow what you think people expect of you, or well, I'm only on this level, so I can only do this type of, I can only do a slice of life movie because I don't have the monetary funds. Like, no, you don't have to just do a slice of life movie. There's nothing wrong with slice of life films. I'm not trying to diss slice of life films. They can be very, very good. But the idea that, well, my film has to be a slice of life film, and it doesn't have to be perfect on a technical level because other people aren't making their films perfect on a technical level. And that's what indie movies are. They're just supposed to be rough. It's like, no, it's very viable to create a film on an extremely low budget that goes head to head with any blockbuster. And I feel like if more people had that mindset of, no, my film is just as viable as, I don't know, Nomadland, or if you're making a horror film, no, my film is just as relevant and viable as Hereditary, I think there would be a significant upsurge in movies that push the medium forward on an independent level. But I think the idea of, well, I'm an independent filmmaker, carries along certain connotations of, well, this is just what I make because I'm an independent filmmaker. And it's like, no, you can be doing a lot more. And that, again, it's not you. I'm not referring to anyone specifically. But yeah, no, I just really want to see people pushing themselves. Because I do think, in a certain regard, the cinematic language can get to the point where it just becomes so unpopular to make a film that is trying to do anything new, that it will reach a point of stagnation. And I don't think that we've reached that point yet. Hi. Hold on. My light. Yeah, so at this point I say I don't think we've reached that point yet, of reaching a point of stagnation and utter despair in terms of the lack of creativity on the mainstream level, but I do think it's a very plausible reality that we could reach this point specifically, I would say within the next maybe 5 to 10 years, if we could continue the current trajectory of artistic output, at least in the U.S., with regards to the Hollywood system and their tendency to produce the types of films that they produce. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think it's very plausible, scary, but very, very, very plausible, very realistic. But hey, that's just my opinion. But even on an independent level, I really don't see on an individual creator-based level or on a communal level, community-based level, I don't really see the push for make new stuff, make stuff that we haven't seen before. It's usually just go out and make something. And yes, for sure, if you want to make a film, there is nothing holding you back, conceivably. But don't react on impulse of like, I want to make a movie, I'm gonna make the first idea that pops in my head, super quick, because I just want it to exist. Yes, that's a very understandable reaction, 100%. But I think in order to make a film that has staying power, because I think that's the point of every film, whether you're trying to go for something with very deep messaging or something that is just entertaining, staying power is important. And very rarely is a film that's just, I'm gonna roll some dice and make something quick. I don't think that very few films with that mindset have staying power. Takeaways. What is cinema? Cinema is using filmmaking to tell a story. Is cinema as a language dead or dying? Overall, no. Are aspects of it dead or dying? Yes. And then what is the future of cinema? An increased disparity between the mainstream and independent levels, oversaturation, complacency, filmmaking seen more as a business and not an artistic venture, and a significant lack or complete near obliteration of cinematic literacy. Now, what I think is the future of cinema and what I hope this future of cinema is very different. I hope that the future of cinema is bright. I on both levels, for the mainstream and independent levels. I don't want cinema to just die and fizzle out. I mean, look at my background. I'm not a angry dude. I'm joking again, but like I really am. Like I really do want cinema to endure for generations, because I think it's the most important and effective artistic medium around. That's not a diss against other artistic mediums. I just think it's the most important, and it's the one I'm the most passionate about, and I don't want to see it disappear or drop into a state worse off than it already is. So yeah, and I think, again, at the end of the day, whether cinema dies or not. I don't think it ever will, because there's always going to be artists pushing the medium forward, whether you see their stuff or not, which is the sad part, but there is always someone pushing the medium forward, whether they're in your country or not, whether you've heard of them or not, whether you see their stuff or not. There's always people pushing it forward. All in all, no matter where cinema goes, Lord willing, as long as I get to keep making stuff, I'll keep making stuff. I'll be encouraging people that I know to keep on making things, to put as much time and effort into those things as possible, and to keep pushing the medium forward in any way that I can, as long as I'm able to. Which I don't know. Maybe I'll never make another movie again, but who's to say? I appreciate the opportunity to ramble on about movies. I hope some of this made sense and was either thought-provoking, encouraging. Hopefully it wasn't too annoying. That's all I really got to say. And I'm out of here. Bye.
Doesn't this look appetizing? Delicious, even? This is a metaphor for what I call independent film. And of course, in this documentary style, you're going to see me manipulating different things, because I want to do this in one take, hopefully, or maybe three. It depends how I do it, but yeah, this is George, aka Spike Greene, who I want to demonstrate with this being independent film in this metaphor, and this banana being mainstream film, okay? So, yeah, this banana, what is cinema to me? I will explain with these two fruits, okay? So, what is cinema? Cinema is basically, it's, people think of it as a polar of two extremes, okay? But it can be more than that. This apple, it has a juicier flavor. It has more to deal with. You can see, at the risk of being pretentious, I just want to say that blockbuster cinema does not have to be a rival to independent cinema. However, it is being right now, because independent cinema is being put way back here, and blockbuster is presented in your face like, oh, this can really just be consumed one way, it's just that sort of thing. But why, Cinema can be anything and everything. I classify everything cinema as art, whether it's good or not, and that's really subjective. Like Pretty Woman is just awful. On a scale of, I'm going to include the plate in this shot. On a scale from awful to good, awful off the plate, good is on the plate. Yeah, Pretty Woman is bad. But, something like Little Miss Sunshine, excellent. But there can be polar opposites, of course. Cold War, I personally hated. But something like the Avengers movies. I know you're going to probably kill me for this, but I like the Avengers movies, okay? Okay, so, with that out of the way, I do think that they can coexist. Cinema is really just an experience where you put different images together, sounds, different things, this is very stripped back. This is definitely a type of cinema that people can get behind. And if you're not seeing my face right now, I will show it at the end in a second take, alright? But I do think that cinema is just whatever a person wants it to be, whatever a filmmaker wants it to be. You have your experimental stuff, like, from obscure, I'm going to use the background as obscure, and I'm going to use the foreground as, popular. So you have the great popular stuff, like, Avengers, whatever it is, or whatever popular thing you happen to like at this point in time. And, here, way over here, are the experimental filmmakers. And, they're just stuck in obscurity, while these take the theaters. And it doesn't have to be that way. Theaters, in a way, I think should become, not should become, but I think they will become more niche, alright? But, yeah, here's the thing, though. I do think that because they'll become more niche, I'm just going to discuss their future for a bit. And that is, I really do think that they're going to price things up maybe a tiny bit. I know other people have thought that, but yeah, So in the middle ground here, maybe it won't be as popular in the cinema, but when it hits VOD or even DVD, Blu-ray, I love physical media myself. I'm a physical media type of guy. So yeah, while this will be over here, this has more chance of being, say, over here. Yeah? So yeah. And is cinema as a language dying or dead? Well, I don't think so. You know, if I can create a metaphor, however, it's probably a bit pretentious, but with 2 pieces of fruit and a plate and a tray. Okay, it sounds ridiculous when I say it, but okay. Now, I do think anything can be cinema, whether experimental or not, and this very thing here is very experimental. So, yeah, I do think that, yeah, I'm saying bananas and apples can coexist, but apples are just juicier. And that is why I don't think cinema's dying. I also don't think it's dying because people are going to want to create, they're going to want to innovate, they're going to, you know, just anything they can to stay relevant, to even stay in the scene, and they just want to create, and some take their time and some rush it out, and rushing it out is not the best thing, but taking too much time is maybe a bit of a cause for perfectionism. And yeah, the language here, you know, you have your close-ups, you have the extreme wide shot, whatever it is. I'm just roughly estimating there, obviously. But yeah, what we have here is simply an evolution. I'm filming this right now on an iPhone 11, I think it is, yeah? And the camera's working just fine. I can fit everything in frame if I really want. Only there's a technical restriction of a table and the phone's about to fall off if I let it go. So yeah, you can have rigs, you can have different stuff. They have so many attachments for the iPhone, and I'm going to use these as different metaphors now. So yeah, here is the, you know, everyone wants the camera, but that's out of reach. Filmmakers do what they got to do. They got to deal with this, you know, they got to deal with just an iPhone that is popular. I know you would have expected me to make the iPhone the Apple because haha, but alright, well, I do really think that use whatever you can, you know, have a happy medium. Like, what's a medium between, I don't know, an apple and the more liked taste of a banana? I've always liked bananas more than apples, but that doesn't work for this metaphor. Okay, so yeah, maybe, I don't know, a mandarin that combines a different flavor of film with popular stuff. Maybe that's, so imagine, I don't have any mandarins on me right now, but imagine, you know, like, obscure, studio independent, studio. Yeah, I do think that, it is split up like that a bit, but, yeah, what was I trying to say here? Yeah. I just really want this damn banana right now. Okay, but I feel like if this is too far up the front, then, you know, this is just gonna disappear. Also, I wanted the apple. I wanted the damn apple, alright? So, yeah. But I'm gonna use that for a bigger point. Okay. Now, the apple is, if it's taken a bite out of, it means less screenings, it means less of this, less of that. And that's a shame because we really need fresh voices, but these session times taken over the cinemas keep taken away from that. And eventually it's going to be cut down to the core, and many are already going to VOD and all that stuff, but I don't see why it has to. Although, I mean, I have no idea where to fit the fact that I'm eating a bit of the apple into this metaphor. Okay, so yeah, those are the reasons why I think cinema's alive and well and kicking, and many people have many different styles, and that's the reason I think that cinema is what it is. Everything's art, whether you like it or not, everything, you know, and it does matter, but it doesn't matter ultimately in some way. If there's a bite taken out of independent film, we can rise up again, can't we? So yeah, I am an aspiring filmmaker, and I will credit myself as Spike Greene, and this is a short film, which I've loved film ever since I was born. I've just loved it, and I'll show you my face in a second, but this has been Spike Greene signing out. And thank you for listening to all the talk in mostly one take. Thank you, I really do appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, and I can't wait to see every other person's. So yeah, this is going to be epic, this documentary. All right, peace.
What is cinema? For me, it's a case of feature-length films and something that's been thought about in a big way. So you get short films as well, where a lot of effort has been put into creating a sort of excellent sort of moving image, whether that's the sound, the costume, the lighting, something that feels like, wow, this is elevated and that's lifted and like cinematography, do you know what I mean? All of that, that's what I feel like it is. And yeah, a lot of choices being made to tell a story in I'd say a primarily visual way. Is it dead or dying? I think it's perhaps not very well, and it needs to change its lifestyle. I think that home movie systems are so good now. You can buy projectors, you can buy massive tellies, you can buy incredible speakers, all of that stuff, and you can just watch it in your own home, or just watch stuff on your phone, and that's pretty good. I mean, the colour's great, sound pretty bloody good. When you think where people were in a place of lack, where they only had a tiny little black and white telly, or maybe a slightly bigger colour telly, at that point going to a cinema was an immersive transitionary experience where you got to experience something that was beyond the compass of your life. Now going to the cinema is like, oh yeah, this is quite nice, this is a bit nicer, and it has to be better than that. It has to be more of a change from day-to-day life, more of a change from your home, I think. And so I think people like secret cinema and stuff like that are onto something where you've got these immersive experiences where people can go along and feel involved in the worlds that they're going to see. Because that's not something you're going to be able to do at home, and interacting with other people and almost bringing the theatre back into the cinema in a way. I think that will help, and stuff like, I don't know, smells or stuff like that, basically just interacting and elevating it in a way that you can't at home. That's what cinema's got to be now. And I don't know that I totally buy the sort of the luxury route that people like the Odeon and stuff are taking, where it's like, well, go see a film and have some fancy snacks. Again, you can get fancy snacks at home, and then you don't have to go out. I don't know that there will be an appetite for that. But if it's this experience is different, that's where I think it needs to go in the future, which is answering the next question. And that's me done. Gotcha. Thank you, Don't Tell Show, for all your amazing, cool, wicked insights and putting the spotlight on really interesting stuff that I'm really enjoying. Thank you.
For me, cinema is an experience, not a tangible or physical entity. I don't believe a few hundred people sat in a dark hall in front of a 34-foot screen defines what cinema is, or that one couldn't experience cinema sat at home in the front room. I guess for me at least, cinema is purely storytelling through motion picture or use of digital video, but not digital video alone. Anyone can record a video and capture something, but when the images captured have purpose, and the way it is captured has motivation, and the aim is to get across a story to the viewer, then it starts to fall into the category of cinema. But it's not quite there yet. To really cement that title, it needs to take you into a form of isolation from distraction, to engage on a meaningful level or evoke some kind of emotion and have closure of some sorts. One could argue that historical and current TV episodes can do that, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree. More so now than ever before. We can watch an episode of Game of Thrones or Line of Duty and feel that cinematic presence, but the viewer plays an important part in the equation also. Like everything, opinion-wise, it's subjective. There's no golden rule, I don't think at least, that can say this is cinema, but I think we can universally agree with what is not, with maybe a large flaw for all those ones in between. Images or video captured without purpose is just news. that's the political stance I make. But to dig true and deep into my very soul on what cinema really is to me, it's pure imagination. It's the escape from reality. It's the wonder and hope it fills in the younger me. It wants to shape what I become when I grow up. I want to do what Han Solo did and ride the Kessel Run. I want to survive a theme park overrun with live dinosaurs. I want to save Buttercup from Prince Humperdinck, and so on and so on. Because when we first encounter cinema and we fall in love with it, we're never thinking about how big the screen is, or who we're watching it with, or what camera it was shot on, or if it's from film or digital, or realising any kind of digital noise in the shadows. We're just completely lost in the story. Going back to traditional cinema platforms like the theatre, then I think it's dying out. I think the bigger where screens get in my home, there's less of an excuse to go out. So unfortunately, I do think eventually, the theatre for cinema will be a thing of the past. But cinema itself will continue to thrive and evolve with whatever time brings us, and stories will never die, so cinema can never die. Is cinema as a language dead? I think it's never been more alive. All barriers or guidelines, rules that we thought were needed are long gone. It's a free-for-all for creatives to convey what they want and how they want to convey it. The metaphoric is as featured as it's ever been, and I think it'll remain. The difference is access to the means to create a film. In the past, this was attainable to those directly in the cinema business with the tools to express their vision or message to the masses. Now we have YouTube and Vimeo and tools that are up to the job at consumer prices, flying off production lines faster than ever. What is lost in the language of convention of cinema is the knowledge of how to be cinematic or express that message in any kind of engaging or meaningful way. Anyone can pick up a camera or a phone and do a quick few how-tos from YouTube on editing or colouring, and they can whack the title of cinematic film onto it. What they lack is the understanding or experience of everything that should really make up what they have to say. And more often than not, they actually don't have anything to say at all. But those that do have something to say, those that do understand the structure of film or story, well, they've now got those platforms to express themselves. No longer are cinema screens and huge budgets relied upon. It's open to everyone. And people are expressing themselves and their stories in continually creative and cinematic ways. It's just that it shares that stage with all the non-cinema expression out there.